Welcome to another episode of Systematic Geekology. This is a space where we seek to create and cultivate healthy conversations between those things we geek out on and the philosophical and theological questions that often arise out of our fandoms. Like, what does it mean to be human? What makes a hero? What makes a villain? How do the stories and narratives we geek out on shape how we live in the world? We are your priest to the geeks. We aren't all ordained, but we see ourselves as mediators at the intersection of geek culture and going deeper in our faith. We don't always have to agree, but we do respect each other, and we see everyone as a beloved child of God. Everyone geeks out on something, so come geek out with us and enjoy the show.
You're listening to an Anazao Ministries podcast.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, space rangers, cowboys and cowgirls, and potato heads of all ages, we welcome you all to the wonderful world of Walt Disney's animation studios, and in this case, Pixar. If you couldn't tell what movie we're talking about today based on that description, we are discussing the first Toy Story, and this is part of our Disney era series. This is Systematic Geekology. We are the priest of the geeks. And in this series, we've been looking at different eras from Disney animation and looking at different movies to correspond with those eras. This is actually one of 3 Pixar movies we'll be discussing. So even though Pixar is technically separate from Disney, there is obviously a lot of correlation between the two, a lot of history between the two companies, both as rivals and then eventually partners, which we'll get into in a little bit. So yeah, very excited to talk about the first Toy Story movie. And I am Kevin Schaefer. I am here with one of my fellow geekologists, Andy Walsh. Andy, how are you today?
I'm doing very well today, Kevin. Thanks. How are you?
I'm doing great. I'm excited to talk about this one. And I was joking with you, like when we were scheduling this episode, I think I need a refresher on this movie between growing up on it, seeing it a million times, and then having now a niece and 2 nephews. I think I've only seen it about 10,987 times. But nonetheless, I very much look forward to discussing.
Awesome.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, before we get into the main topic, Andy, what have you been geeking out on lately?
So last night we watched the movie Fly Me to the Moon, which I thought was a little bit related here. Since it's about the Apollo 11 space project, and the transition in the world from the Wild West frontier to space, the frontier.
How was it? Because I remember the trailer. I haven't got it. I just resubscribed to Apple because of Severance season 2, so I can now watch it. But yeah.
It was interesting. I mean, obviously, it's Channing Tatum, Scarlett Johansson, very charismatic leads, very entertaining to see them together. I was surprised at how much of the plot of the movie revolved around events that didn't happen.
Interesting, yeah.
Given that the theme of the movie was about the importance of telling the truth, and that faking the moon landing would have been a betrayal of American values, or betrayal of the truth, betrayal of the hard work that folks put into the Apollo program. I thought it was then odd that they spent so much that so much of the plot revolved around this, faking of the moon landing idea that that they were doing a sort of a backup plan. It wasn't really faking the moon landing so much as just having a backup plan for the TV broadcast in case something went wrong with the actual moon landing. Or the broadcast thereof, or the TV signal, the camera signal from there. So yeah, that was kind of interesting. But there are worse things. It still had a lot of actual truth about the space program as well, and fairly respectful of the Apollo 1 astronauts. So there was a fair amount of tribute to them. So kind of pluses and minuses.
I do want to check it out. I heard mixed things as well, but I don't know if it's like worthy comparison, but I love like Apollo 13 and something like that, like any kind of like space exploration movies, Interstellar, of course. So I know it's still very different from that, but I do want to check it out. I probably now again that I've got Apple, I'll definitely check that out. So I guess, and then for me, speaking of Apple, again, the reason I resubscribed to it is Severance is finally back, which I think is one of the best shows I have seen probably in the last like 10 years, if not more. First season was amazing, and I've been eagerly waiting for season 2 ever since. So I'll probably talk about it more in depth on a What's News episode coming up, but I did very much enjoy the season 2 premiere. Love that show, so I'm really excited that it's back.
Excellent. Can I, by way of segue, can I hit you with a fact that struck me as I was thinking about the movie and the space program?
Absolutely.
There is more time elapsed between the release of Toy Story and now than there had been between the moon landing and the release of Toy Story.
Wow, that's wild. Dang. Are you saying we're getting old here? Or like...
I don't know about you. It made me feel like I was getting old.
Because we will. Well, and I definitely want to get into our first exposure to the movie. And it is wild how much time has passed since that one. But yeah, that's fascinating though. Time is 2025. It's weird, but yeah.
Yep.
Well, that is definitely a great way to put into perspective. And no, thank you for sharing that. And then just before we get into a little more on this episode, first of all, if you're on a laptop, please consider rating and reviewing our show on Podchaser, Good Pods. Definitely helps our show gain recognition and be easier to find in other search engines. If you're on your phone, please consider rating, reviewing, commenting on Apple Podcasts, Spotify. If you download on Spotify or Apple, that really helps us too. There's some support. And also a quick shout out to our supporters from Apple Podcasts, Captivate, Patreon. Russell Gentry, Justin Vaughn, Annette Noel, Jenny Mattingly, Aaron Hardy, Daniel Sigmund, Trip Fuller, James Barrett, Ethan Overcash, Austin Nance, Amber Riley, and Jonathan Augustine. We want to thank all of you for your support. And if you want to chip in, you can also support our show for just $3 a month on any of those platforms. So we really appreciate your support. Okay, well, let us get into Toy Story. So again, this is part of our Disney era series. You can catch up on a playlist of reviews from the series. It'll be linked in the description here. But this is here where we've been looking at different eras from Disney. And in this case, this will be the first Pixar movie we're looking at. So first off, let's get into a little bit about just why we want to look at Pixar in addition to Disney. Again, they, especially at the time that Toy Story was released in 1995, Pixar and Disney were bitter rivals. John Lasseter, one of the co-founders and the director of this movie, was a former employee at Disney, had kind of cut ties with them, and along with Steve Jobs and others, had come to form Pixar. And also, I don't know if any of you know this story, but one of my favorite little bits of really just pop culture history in general is that, part of the reason Pixar was formed is that George Lucas, even after the Star Wars original trilogy had come out, he was actually on the verge of bankruptcy because he had invested so much into Skywalker Ranch, culminating with the fact that he produced the infamous Howard the Duck movie, which of course was a critical and commercial failure. So he kind of needed some cash, and as such, he sold a small VFX division of Lucasfilm to Steve Jobs for however $1 million. And Steve Jobs worked with Lasseter and the others to convert that into Pixar. So I do love that was its origin. So you can inadvertently thank Howard the Duck for Toy Story.
Awesome.
Yeah, exactly. So this is Pixar, obviously huge sensation. And while different from Disney, again, they have such a history of starting off as rivals and then eventually becoming key partners. And now, if you go to Disney theme parks or any kind of Disney property, you will see a ton of Pixar merchandise, theme parks, characters, etc. So the two have become very much intertwined, whereas they were once separate. And as a lifelong Disney and Pixar fan, I'm glad that the two coexist now because, I can't really imagine like especially like Hollywood Studios now with all the Toy Story lands. It's one of my favorite attractions there. So, Eddie, before we get into, because that's a little bit, I'll just say like my relationship both with Toy Story and Pixar is, I was born in 93. So, I was like right at a kid, right at growing up with Pixar, and growing up with Toy Story. So it was a really cool experience for me because Toy Story came out when I was very young. I especially remember seeing Toy Story 2 in theaters, growing up on the VHSs and everything. And then by the time Toy Story 3 came out, I was in high school, and it was sort of a like farewell to these characters, even though little did I know they would make a fourth one. But that was kind of like a, coming of age, like, ending of this chapter in my life. So it was really cool to grow up in that time with these characters on these stories. But what was your kind of background, like the first time you saw this movie and, just like general exposure to Pixar?
Sure. It's continuing the theme of I'm getting old. I was in high school. This movie came out my senior year of high school. And so I missed it when it went around in theaters. Disney and animated films just kind of weren't really on my radar. So the first time that I saw this would have been the following year when I was in college. At Carnegie Mellon, they had, as a lot of schools do, they had movies on the weekends for like $1 or something. You could get them with your student ID, and Toy Story was one of those movies. And Carnegie Mellon, big computer science school, and so everybody was stoked about the first computer graphics, first feature length computer animated film. So the crowd was really into it. I remember folks being excited about the fact that it was the first film to have a website URL in the end credits. If you sat around long enough,
wow,
www.toystory.com or whatever it was, I'm sure it was something like that, came up as part of the end credits, just like to encourage you to go and log into this website. With the World Wide Web kind of became a big deal just a year before. 1994 is kind of, I think, considered the launch of the World Wide Web to the public. Right. So they kind of came up together. So that was a big deal. Everybody was kind of excited about that. And I really enjoyed the movie on first viewing. My wife was, I didn't know her at the time, but eventually, we met in college and I got married. And she was a big Disney kid growing up, and fell in love with the Pixar movies. So the Toy Story 1 and 2, like toy box set, like special edition box set was one of our first DVD purchases. And we got a lot of mileage out of those. And then for me, Toy Story 3 was one of the first movies that we took our kids to in the theaters. So, that theme of kind of passing things from one generation to another really resonated. Was really something that we were experiencing going to see that movie.
Go ahead.
No, I think that's it.
No, I was going to say all of that too. This movie is so generational. It has that long-lasting impact. As I said, I was a kid when it came out. Well, I was only 2 when this one came out, but like I was a kid in theater when Toy Story 2 came out, and I grew up on these movies and on Pixar. And then now, like I said, I've got a niece and 2 nephews. And so seeing them have just as much enthusiasm for this one as, anything else they're exposed to, it's really cool to have that long lasting impact that it's just so, timeless and universal, and it speaks to different generations. And I actually got a few years ago on Halloween when my youngest nephew was, I think he was only a few months or so at the time. Me, my brother and sister-in-law and my nephew did a Toy Story a costume group for Halloween, which I got to be Stinky Pete, which was a blast. My brother was Buzz, my sister-in-law was Jessie, and my nephew was Woody, and their dog was Bullseye. So that was a blast. But I got to, because my costume was like, I had to be in a group, otherwise I wasn't. People were like, "Who are you supposed to be?" Because I remember going by the comic shop right before we got together, and I was in costume, and they were like trying to guess who I was, and I was like, "If I stand next to Woody and Buzz, you'll know exactly who I am." But I had the white beard and everything, so that was a blast. But it is so cool. I mean, thinking about just the impact of Toy Story it has, had this timeless generational impact on, kids, adults, families, and it speaks to, I think we'll get into more as far as why you also talked about, and that is why it was such a groundbreaking, at the time of its release. It was the first computer generated animated movie, which is a huge deal for the time. No one had seen this type of animation and rendered in the way it was. And that is fascinating too. I did not know that was the first movie to have a website address at the very end, which makes total sense. I mean, these were, Pixar heads were some of the biggest technological innovators. And, it reminds me of too, like when Peter Jackson was working on Lord of the Rings, he was one of the first adopters of using online forums to communicate with fans and update them throughout the process. And for any younger listeners out there, hey, there was a time before streaming and there was a time before social media, but there were other avenues and innovative technologies that were coming about that were very revolutionary at the time. And I think too, even with all of the movies that have come since then, both from Pixar and Disney later adopted the kind of similar style with movies like Frozen and Tangled. But even since then, Toy Story still holds up so well with its animation, with its themes. So we will get into all that. Anything else you want to say just about your relationship with the movie before we get into kind of a brief plot summary and dive deeper into the movie?
Just a little bit more of that context, not really my relationship, but that historical context that I thought was interesting. I was trying to refresh my memory. Right. So 1984, so 11 years earlier, was the first time in The Last Starfighter was the first time that computer graphics had been used to represent something that was actually supposed to be the real thing. Right. Computer graphics had been on screen before, but they were used to be computer graphics. Right. They were on screen displays and things like that. So 84 was the very first use of computer graphics to render something that you were supposed to read as real. 91 is the Terminator 2 movie, which made a big splash for its computer graphics. Only 4 to 5 minutes of on-screen CGI, right? There were, so they were mixing with practical effects, and they were just not using the T1000 that often to preserve how much time they had to spend rendering and so forth. So that's just 4 years earlier. 2 years earlier, Jurassic Park, we have digital dinosaurs. They're only on screen for 6 minutes. But they were the first kind of photorealistic computer graphics of something that actually existed in the real world, right? So the T1000, Robert Patrick real, the T1000 not so real. Dinosaurs, even though we don't know exactly what they look like, they were real things. But only 6 minutes of screen time. And then, so only two years later to go from that to a full feature-length film was kind of mind-boggling.
That is wild and fascinating. It's just like, you think, because what's like Jurassic Park and stuff are such monumental blockbusters and advance the technology so much, but to see that it's actually that little amount of time of CG is fascinating. And since you brought up The Last Starfighter, I actually got to see that in theaters last year. They were playing it at Alamo, I think toward the end of the summer. Yeah, that was a fun time. So that's definitely a gem if you've not gotten to see. It's quite campy and fun. I really love the alien designs in that movie and the special effects. So that's a really good summer blockbuster if you get a chance to see sometime. But yeah, awesome. Well, no, thank you so much for that perspective. This is what I think we've got between our interests. This is like a perfect summation of getting into just like the impact that Toy Story had in Pixar's history. So this is fascinating. But I don't want to spend too much time on this because I imagine most people have seen Toy Story, so don't need like a huge recap. But for the story of the movie, this takes place in a world where toys have personalities and talk with each other. Granted, their human owners or counterparts don't know that they are alive, but the toys kind of exist in their own world. We meet, of course, Woody and the gang, and Woody is the favorite toy of the kid Andy. And for a long time, he's held this title. But when the movie opens, it is Andy's birthday, and Woody and the rest of the toys are gathered around. They send the little toy soldiers on a mission to spy and do reconnaissance to find out, what toys is Andy getting this time? And lo and behold, the biggest one he gets is, of course, Buzz Lightyear, the super popular Space Ranger. And as soon as Buzz comes in, and also Buzz, when he meets the toys, he has no idea that he is a toy. He is fully convinced that he is a Space Ranger from outer space, there to fight the evil Zurg and protect Earth, which makes Woody even more mocking of him. But as Buzz moves in, he quickly becomes Andy's new favorite toy. Woody feels like he's becoming replaced, and as such develops a bitter jealousy. And one night, this is as Andy and his family are getting ready to move, they go out to dinner one night, and Andy's mom tells him that he can bring one toy with him. He intends to bring Buzz, but Woody, prior to that, tries to have Buzz knocked out of the way, not in a harming way, but basically isolated so that Andy won't see him, that he'll take Woody instead. But this leads to an incident where Buzz is knocked outside the window, and the rest of the toys think that Woody has, become a monster and killed Buzz. So this creates a bitterness between them. But then Woody is taken to Pizza Planet. So he's in the car. Buzz eventually catches up with them, and they have a fight at a gas station. And it's during the scene where they're left behind because Andy doesn't know that they got off the car and are fighting in the parking lot. They then hitch a ride and catch up with Andy and his family at Pizza Planet. But a series of events unfold, and both Wuz and Buddy are kidnapped by Andy, or taken by Andy's sadistic neighbor, Sid, who takes them back to his house. And is, quite an evil kid, has basically other sort of mutated, outcasted toys there that he does experiments on. And as this storyline plays out, this is where Buzz comes to an existential crisis and realizes that he is in fact a toy after seeing an ad on TV for other Buzz Lightyears. And this creates an existential crisis. Eventually, Woody helps him realize his true purpose, and they become friends. And Woody helps him realize that Buzz is there to make Andy happy, and that he can still have purpose even though he is not the actual Buzz Lightyear Space Ranger. He can still be a true hero, and he can still be a great toy. So then series of events unfold. Eventually, the two of them lead kind of an uprising with the other outcasted toys and scare the crap out of Sid and eventually escape. In the finale, they are trying to catch up to the moving bus before Andy and his family leave. All this time, Andy thinks that Woody and Buzz are gone forever. And also the toys are still against Woody because they think he killed Buzz. That eventually gets resolved. And then in a big climax, after Buzz is convinced the whole time, when he still thinks he's not a toy, that he can fly, there's this great flying sequence, and the line, this isn't flying, it's falling with style. So it's a great moment. And eventually they do reunite with Andy. They're in the back of the truck. All the conflicts with the toys get resolved. And in the final scene, it's Christmas at the new house. And now Woody and Buzz are friends. But they're, a callback to the beginning of the movie, they're seeing what Andy's getting for Christmas. And they both have a bit of a panic attack when Andy's big gift is a puppy. So that sets the stage for the sequel. But yeah, so that is the first Toy Story in a nutshell. Anything you want to add to that, Andy?
No, that was a great job.
Perfect. Like you said, I didn't really need to refresh myself on this one. I've seen it quite a few times. And then as far as a rating for this movie, I don't really think we need to disclose how much we love it. But do you have any criticisms of Toy Story, or any rating you want to give it? I think for me, it still holds up as really a 10 out of 10.
Yeah, I mean, I think the only thing to hold against it is that it's not Toy Story 2. That's very true. But other than that, no quibbles.
There is nothing like the sequence in Toy Story 2 with that heartbreaking song when it reveals Jesse's origin and the "If Somebody Loves You," that ripped everyone's heart out, no matter how old you were, including Tom Hanks and Tim Allen. They talked about how when they first saw a screening of it, they were in tears. That is a heartbreaking scene. But no, it's one of the few franchises where it gets better and better. But still, nonetheless, it is a great first movie. Okay, so we talked a little bit about just the CG and the animation, but is there anything else you want to add to just like the specific style, how the CG is rendered here, what the characters look like, especially for Andy, from your perspective as a scientist and talking about how innovative it was to see this kind of animation back in the 90s.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, like I said, nothing quite like this had been seen on screen before. Pixar had done some short films. I don't know how widely those were seen. I don't remember having seen any of them. Obviously, the short film before the Pixar feature has become a staple. But I think for most people that was their first introduction to those Pixar shorts. I don't know how, I don't know where else one might have seen, Tin Toy or things like that in the theaters. I think they were largely festival kinds of things and whatnot. So that was groundbreaking. Obviously, it was, and I don't know the history of how they came to this choice, whether it was serendipitous or whether somebody sat down and thought, what can we actually render well? But, the decision to make a movie about toys so that you could do a lot of hard surfaces and, you didn't need photorealistic humans and you didn't have to solve the uncanny valley problem of, humans that look kind of human, but not quite, that, Polar Express and some other films, kind of ran into later on. So, it was very well thought through, very well executed to look as good as it could. Obviously, looking back, even compared to the later Toy Stories, right, you can clearly tell a difference. It is clearly, early days in computer animation, but I don't think that takes you out of it even watching it now. I think it still works. I think they, like I said, they make smart choices to to restrict what they were trying to accomplish and to do something that they knew they could do well with the technology of the time, while also kind of pushing things. And it was also fun. It was also interesting to see kind of watching the Pixar evolve and the technology evolve, right? I remember going to see Monsters Inc. and just being blown away by the fur on Sully. Because previous to that, you had a lot of characters, like I said, with hard surfaces, things that were fairly easy to render with simple textures and things like that. I say simple, but compared to the complexity of having to render a surface that's entirely fur, was just mind blowing. There's a sequence in the snow at some early on in Monsters Inc. that was just kind of like, okay, now this is next level for sure. And subsequent films with water and all feathers and various different things that they've really just continued to put the boat out. But even at the time, it was impressive to see what they could do. And I don't have strong memories of every bit of that first viewing, but I don't remember at any point ever feeling like, oh, this is taking me out of the story. This looks too hokey or whatever. You just kind of went with it. Even when we did get human characters, and they weren't the most photorealistic human characters that we'd ever seen, but to me, the point of reference is Aladdin and Beauty and the Beast and films like that, where those are stylized humans as well, and so they went with stylized look rather than trying to be photorealistic, and I think that was smart and it paid off.
And I think early on, it's a great point that there was so much evolution after that. This was obviously the revolutionary and the basis for everything that came after. But I think one of the strongest things about the animation here is just the facial expressions and eye movements of the characters, and how that was really what made these toy characters feel real and lived in. And even more human than the human characters in the movie. That was, I think, one of the biggest things. I think there was already a mass improvement in Toy Story 2, because I still remember seeing it in theaters, and that opening sequence with which turned out to be Rex playing a Buzz Lightyear video game, but it felt like a actual Buzz on a space mission battling Zurg. That sequence was mind blowing as a kid. So there was already a massive evolution just in those first two movies. But here, I think that was some of the coolest thing, was just like the expressions of the characters, the dynamics between them. It really pinpointed to how revolutionary the style was and the potentials of it.
Yeah, and I don't think you can underestimate the analog value of having Tom Hanks and Tim Allen, whom you mentioned, being the voices of our two main characters. My sense is, and kind of looking back at the cast of animated films that were coming out around this time, it wasn't unheard of to have recognizable names and recognizable voices in those kinds of films. Obviously, it had Robin Williams in Aladdin voicing the genie, for example, and the Lion King film that had come out a year or two earlier had a fairly well-known cast. But a lot of the Disney movies that preceded this had relative unknowns or voice actors in the lead roles. They might have known character actors in supporting roles. So having like Don Rickles and Wallace Shawn show up here in Toy Story in the supporting characters, it was not quite as notable. But Tom Hanks, Tom Hanks has kind of continued to be Tom Hanks, but this was sort of the first peak of his popularity. This was Tom Hanks, Oscar winner and perennial Oscar nominee, and Tim Allen was the star of one of the biggest sitcoms on TV. Was also in starring in feature films, in live action feature films, and so having that kind of star power, those recognizable voices, giving humanity to these animated characters who might otherwise come across they're not even human characters, right? They're toys who come to life. And so yes, the facial animations and all that were very expressive and really helped to sell that. But I think also the humanity and the talent of the voices behind them sold it as well.
Consider subscribing on YouTube, where you can get some other stuff. You get exclusive series like our comic book catch-up, Manga Mustard, Drinks with Tejas, and a companion series we do each year to go with our annual theme. You also get access to Friday Night Frights and Wednesday Night Weeaboo and Spidey Swing Bys with Christian Ashley. You get access to other exclusive shorts, like what I'm going to be doing soon are non-canon, where I'm going to be reviewing different IPs that are outside of canon from our favorite fandoms or the Bible and discussing whether or not it should be canon. You also can get a short of Will's Wednesday pull list. So if you're into comic books, Will goes through his favorites of each week's pull list for himself. You also get other bonuses over there. Most of our surprise content we'll put straight to YouTube, going live over there, that you can check out. And a lot of our regular episodes are also posted on YouTube if you just want to see our smiling faces.
And since you brought up casting, I'm looking just at Wikipedia right now. I knew some of this, but this is fascinating looking at some of the names that might have been too. So for Woody, John Lasseter always wanted Tom Hanks and approached him, but a couple other considerations from Jeffrey Kattensberg, who was at Disney. Paul Newman was considered, who later accepted the role of Doc Hudson in Cars. So he did get a Pixar role eventually. Robin Williams and Clint Eastwood were also possibilities here. Robin Williams, I can kind of see Clint Eastwood. I guess with the cowboy thing, I think that's what they were going for. Sure. But it's one of those things you can't imagine anyone other than Tom Hanks. But the ones for Buzz, this is a whole list of potentials here. So Billy Crystal was approached and declined, which he later regretted, but then ended up taking the role of Mike Wazowski in Monsters, Inc. But in addition to Crystal, these are some wild names that were considered for Buzz. You've got Bill Murray, Chevy Chase, which I knew, Jim Carrey, Jason Alexander, Dan Aykroyd, Matthew Broderick, Kevin Costner, Michael J. Fox, Richard Gere, David Hasselhoff, Michael Keaton, Wayne Knight, Bill Paxton, Dennis Quaid, Kurt Russell, Adam Sandler, and John Travolta. Some of those, I can definitely see. Others are like, wow, that is a wonderful, what if, but ultimately went to Tim Allen, who, like you said, was a huge star of Home Improvement at the time. And then, some of the other casting that were, Wallace Shawn will always be Rex. It was just so iconic there. There was, just such iconic casting that made for so much of what made this movie what it is. Mm-hmm. And then while we're on that, so I'm looking at just some of the other the history of the movie. again, a lot of it has to do with the relationship between Pixar and Disney. So John Lasseter, and by the way, so I do want to put a discussion here because like John Lasseter, just as a note, did have accusations made against him years ago. We will also bring up another problematic figure in Joss Whedon. So we kind of have to discuss these people, but I do want to put a discussion there that yes, these are problematic figures with Me Too allegations against them. So I just want to put that up there that we're not necessarily condoning these people as people, but they were very intricate to this movie. But so years before Pixar and before Toy Story, John Lasseter had pitched a fully CG movie, an adaptation of The Brave Little Toaster to Disney, which was rejected, and that eventually led to his firing from Disney. There was a lot of back and forth over the years, and but eventually Disney became to be a distributor and to have at least like not so much like creative control over the movie, but that there would be deals and settlements so that they could sell merchandise and they could have the characters at theme parks. And originally there was a short called Tin Toy, and Toy Story would be a feature-length adaptation of that. And then as far as the writing, so because this was being entirely produced by Pixar with the heads there, a lot of the animators there, like Andrew Stanton, Lasseter, Pete Docter, who are all, especially Andrew Stanton and Pete Docter, have gone on to be key creative forces and make some of the best Pixar movies of all time. But at the time, a lot of them were not experienced screenwriters. They were veteran cartoonists, and they understood animation and how to, craft an animated world, but weren't necessarily veteran screenwriters and didn't know how exactly to produce a feature-length screenplay. So because of that, the script went through multiple rewrites and, was still in kind of a phase of not knowing really where they wanted to go. Eventually, they were brought on writers like Joel Cohen, not Joel Cohen, like of the Coen brothers, but a key difference is the H in Cohen, Alex Sokolow, and later, again, bringing up a problematic figure, but one who did have a key influence on the script and the final version is Joss Whedon, who at the time was a rising screenwriter. I guess at this time, Buffy had premiered. I'm not exactly sure the time. I'd have to look up there when the timeline was, but he had written an Alien movie. He was very much a rising force in Hollywood. So he made significant rewrites in the script, was the one who introduced Rex. He introduced Bo Peep, and he was the one who re-envisioned Buzz Lightyear's story as from being kind of a dim-witted but cheerful and self-aware character to an action figure who isn't aware that he's a toy. That was what really transformed the film and changed the entire arc of the narrative. So eventually, the script was approved on January 19th, 1983, and at that point, voice casting had begun. So it's quite a fascinating history. I really recommend you, like anyone who wants to go into depth here, can look up just like all the ups and downs and the pitfalls that came into the production of this movie. It is quite fascinating. And is there anything you want to share about just like the history and production side?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of that was news to me, so I don't have a whole lot more to add. But yeah, I mean, Joss Whedon was a big name at the time in script doctoring, coming in to fix scripts. And so, there's always been rumors of, which movies he had to pass on that, went uncredited because of the various WGA rules. But yeah, so that was a big deal. And that Tin Toy short was the first computer animated short to win an Academy Award.
Yeah, it is. And it's fascinating that, that was the origins. And also, Woody's original name was Tinny, which I'm glad that was changed too. This is a fascinating, what if could be. There was also a lot of hardships they had with recruiting animators because, and they didn't have a lot to pay. Pixar was still an entirely new company. I also, if you want to dig deeper into this, I recommend listeners go check out, it's a documentary called The Pixar Story. I watched it on Netflix a few years ago. I don't know if it's still available there, but it's probably really cheap to rent. That one is a really good insight into both the early days of Pixar. And yeah, I mean, it was such almost like a startup where a lot of these creators were just working, with, the computers they had, working in essentially more like basements. It's very similar to like the story of Apple's creation with Jobs and Wozniak working in a basement. So it's, there is a lot to be said about how groundbreaking the movie was. And really what a miracle it was that it got made in the first place, because really they had a lot working against them. And if they hadn't resolved disputes with Disney, who knows if it would have gotten off the ground and where Pixar might have been. So it is fascinating to look at. But yeah, definitely a lot of ups and downs, but eventually came to fruition. I'm glad we got the creative team and the voice cast that we got, because it could have been very different otherwise. So yeah, that's a lot. There's a lot more I think to go into, but definitely check that out. There's plenty of online content you can check out to see a little more about the history behind the making of the movie and the formation of Pixar. So, Andy, getting into a little bit more about what we love about Toy Story, what are some of your favorite scenes, songs, characters? Let's start with favorite scenes. Do you have any that really stick out to you and that never get old?
Yeah, I think for me the best sequence in the movie is the Pizza Planet sequence.
Yes.
When we took our kids to Disney World for the first time, we got to eat at Pizza Planet. They had a themed restaurant there. That was quite a thrill for me. I don't know how much the kids were into it. I think they were. I think they just liked that we got to eat pizza. They were kind of at that age. It gets us out of Andy's house, so it's a fun set piece in a different environment, which was impressive. There's the alien in the claw machine. That's obviously just a great bit with the claw. You've been chosen. So they're a lot of fun, and just the way in which it's a fun bit of action and all that, but it also kind of, because the restaurant is themed around the Buzz Lightyear universe, it helps to reinforce his sense that this is all real. But also raises questions about it's a pizza restaurant that's space ranger that's got a spaceship, and so yeah, it just it's really well done. It's a lot of fun, and I think it's probably one of the highlights of the film for me.
Oh, the Pizza Planet scene is iconic. I've also been to Pizza Planet Disney. Pizza's not bad there too. It's well worth checking out. But I would say one of my favorites in addition is all of the scenes at Sid's house with, again, the kind of like mutated outcasted toys, because what I love about that is that you're initially scared of them, and especially as a kid, you're looking at, this like one-eyed baby head on top of a like Doc Ock type contraption, and you're initially made to think that they're monsters, when in reality these are the more empathetic, displaced, outcasted figures who ended up becoming allies to Woody and Buzz and help them save the day. So I really like that, because it really provides empathy with the movie, and it causes you to look beyond what you initially see. So I really love those sequences. And of course, ones with the iconic lines of like, "You are a toy. You're mocking me, aren't you?" All the quotable ones that never get old. There are so many, but I do love the Pizza Planet. The claw is one of the most iconic moments of the movie, and the LGM voices just never get old. So that's easily one of my favorite as well. And then of course we cannot talk about Toy Story without discussing Randy Newman. Of course, there's "You've Got a Friend with Me," but do you have any other favorite songs from the movies, or even like sequences with the score, because it's a great score as well?
Yeah, apart from "You Got a Friend in Me," I have to say that that's not an element of the movie that has stuck with me necessarily as much. It has been a little bit of time since I've caught up with this one. So I'm struggling to think of anything else that really stands out.
I'll have to look up the name in a sec, but it's the one that's really memorable beyond Friend With Me is when Buzz, after he has that existential realization that he's a toy, and he falls in Sid's house and comes crashing down, and there's another Newman song playing right there that's this kind of more melancholy expression, and it culminates with him on the ground and his legs broken off, and he's kind of in pieces, and he realizes like, oh, I'm not Buzz Lightyear Space Ranger. I'm an action figure, and it's a really like crushing, but really sincere and heartfelt moment. So it culminates perfectly with Newman's music. So I do love that one. And then there's, obviously what Buzz, but there are so many characters in this movie from supporting cast and then both human and toy one. So do you have like any favorite characters in the movie? I mean, I know, of course, everyone loves Woody and Buzz, but any other big standouts?
We've mentioned it before, but I will always be partial to Wallace Shawn's T-Rex.
Yes.
Just a great character, and always happy to see him turn up.
Rex is the best. And then I really love, of course, Mr. Potato Head. As it's kind of like, initially grumpy, and then, his gets even better in 2 and 3 once he has Mrs. Potato Head, and their dynamic with each other. Of course, you love Ham. Of course, you love Bo Peep. I mean, it's a pretty flawless ensemble cast, so there isn't really a bad one. But those are all my favorites. And I love, too, that in a kid's movie, with Woody, I like that you have a character who you still love and relate to, but is also very flawed. And you are all, his jealousy does consume him. And he makes some really bad decisions. And I like that in a kid's movie, you can have someone that is still the leader of the group and is still a great character, but is also very flawed. So I think that's what makes him one that really stands out.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then as far as like where you can find the characters in Toy Story in other movie shows, places in the Disney parks. So here there's a lot. Obviously, there are the Toy Story sequels, which now we have 3 and another one on the way. I have mixed feelings about that because I think they have kind of exhausted the property, or at least if they're going to, I kind of really hope for Toy Story 5, since they're doing it, that they might introduce new characters. And because at this point, even in Toy Story 4, which was surprisingly good, it's not anywhere near as good as the original trilogy, but it's a pretty good Woody solo movie. It almost feels like if they did like Logan, Old Man Wolverine in the Toy Story universe, is a kind of close comparison. But the only thing with that one is like Buzz has some comical moments, but his story is pretty much exhausted and there's not really anything left to do there. So I think with Toy Story 5, I hope they do something fresh and new and maybe bring some new characters and have these ones more supporting ones. Granted, that's a little side rant there. But yeah, so you have Toy Story 2, 3, and 4. Is there, trying to think of I guess there's like shorts and stuff too. Trying to think of any other examples of, and then with Buzz Lightyear, there's quite a bit there. Andy, did you ever watch the animated Buzz Lightyear Space Ranger series?
I did not watch I did not watch that show. We did go see the Lightyear film.
Yes, yeah.
But not the cartoon. No,
I really hope that they add that series to Disney Plus eventually. I don't know why it's not there. There's probably some rights issues or something, but I grew up on that one. It's a great cartoon. There was a movie that kickstarted it, and then a subsequent animated series. It's almost like Green Lanterns, really. It has that space intergalactic police force. And so that one was really good. I do hope it gets it. And yes, there was a Lightyear movie. So those are kind of the main alternate media. And then as far as like where you can find them at Disney parks, we of course mentioned the Pizza Planet location, which is great. And I mentioned Toy Story Land earlier. And that's at Disney World in Orlando in Hollywood Studios. At Disneyland, there's also a huge Pixar section in California Adventures. They've got a lot of stuff with cars there. definitely some Toy Story stuff. But yeah, I think my favorite Toy Story themed element at any of the Disney parks is the two. There's the Buzz Lightyear ride that's at both Disney World and Disneyland. That's been a favorite of a long time. And similar, but because it's also kind of like a shooting sort of like ride, is the Toy Story Mania at Hollywood Studios, which is also like you're in a little cart there. And that one's really cool. Have you ridden both of those, Andy?
Yes. We made sure to do both of those.
Oh yeah, those are a blast. And like I really like the Toy Story Mania because it spins you around. You also are like shooting different objects, and it really integrates it with kind of like more CG animation, and you got the glasses on. It's a ton of fun. But I also love the Space Ranger ride that one is at Magic Kingdom. So yeah, that one's a blast too. And then of course you can find the characters roaming everywhere at the park. So a lot of good Toy Story and Pixar stuff at the various Disney theme parks. So go ahead.
I was gonna say it's not Toy Story 1, but the character Sporky has a series of shorts on Disney Plus and probably on some of the home video release. Sporky Asks a Question, and they are just delightfully absurd little quick gags of Sporky asking things about like what is computer, and getting this explanation of what a computer is from other toys. And they're just very charming. The intro to them has just Sporky asking all kinds of different questions that don't get answered, including how long have you been a horse, which is a question that my daughter and I ask each other on the regular.
I mean, why not? That's and who knows? I mean, this could be some like existential reality where we are, other beings. But I love that. Sparky was a very big standout of Toy Story 4, so I do love that character. But and I mean, I'm sure there's other shorts and stuff I'm missing, but there is so much.
Yeah, there was a Halloween. There was a Halloween special.
Yes. There's a lot. But yeah, I've been riding the Buzz Lightyear ride for years and years. And I really love Toy Story Mania. But yeah, definitely go to all. Next time you're at the Disney parks, go to all of those. Go to Pizza Planet. You'll have a lot of fun there. So very cool. Well, so getting into just the next section here. Thinking deeper about the movie. So, Andy, what do you think kind of one of the core messages of the film was, or the question it was trying to ask? And just describe your perspective on that from a theological, philosophical perspective.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the brilliant things about the film is that its premise works for, a preschool or kindergartner, right? What if your toys came to life while you weren't watching, right? Something that probably lots of kids imagine. And that, that experience of getting new toys and how those fit in with your other toys. I think that's also something a lot of kids have experienced, especially in the era when toys represent people, right? Action figures and dolls and different things where they represent characters that have their own personalities and things that come with them. And so how do those get along, I think, is something that lots of kids thought through as they were growing up. But then also, right, it's Plato's allegory of the cave for preschoolers, right? You've got, trying to wake Buzz Lightyear up from his, preference for this made up world that he inhabits. And, you've got with Woody, the story of, how do you deal with the anxieties of becoming obsolete and being replaced and the world changing around you in ways that you don't recognize. And, on the day of the presidential inauguration here in the United States in 2025, anxieties about the world changing around you and becoming obsolete, are clearly something that's on a lot of people's minds. And how do we deal with that? And how do we deal with the fear and the anger and all that can come with that? And like you said, Woody, goes to in some of those places, right? It isn't just everybody's happy and does all the right things all the time kind of movie. We do see Woody making some questionable choices. We do see a real struggle there with how do we accept somebody who's very different from us in both directions, right? Both Woody and Buzz are having to work with that, and a lot of the other toys too, to a lesser degree. And so yeah, I think it doesn't necessarily unpack all those things. It's not, it's not necessarily a mile deep on those topics. But, how many other movies are Plato's allegory of the cave for preschoolers, right? I mean, it's going there, it's touching on those things. It's an opportunity to start conversations at various ages, right? You can relate to it as a 4 or 5 year old. You can relate to it as a teenager. You can relate to it as an adult and a parent and a middle-aged man or woman. And so yeah, I think there's a lot going on for an 85 minute kids movie.
Oh, I think you nailed it there. And I mean, confronting themes of pride, jealousy, forgiveness, like all these things are packed into it. And like you said, I mean, yes, that's been done other times before, but to do it so eloquently and concise and to have it being relevant to both kids and adults is something that not every movie can do. And I think that's why it's remained so timeless. And again, I know we're focusing on the first movie, but I talked about how I grew up with these, and the third one came out when I was toward the end of high school, and how it was feeling like this this huge part of adolescence and growing up, and you grew up with these characters and dealt with a lot of the same struggles that they dealt with, and those themes are so relevant. And like I talked about, you can have a protagonist like Woody and Buzz who are still great heroes, great characters, but then also have their own flaws and their own petty grievances with each other, and learning how to confront those and become better for themselves and their community as a result. And now, Andy, I do have to ask too, because I am, as you can see from behind me, I am one of many who is guilty of this in that as a collector of many figures and memorabilia, I keep a lot of them in boxes and on display. Do you think that is a crime after watching Toy Story? Should I unleash them and let them be played? Or because I just got a really nice McFarlane toy, Superman 78, that just looks so good up there on the wall, and I don't want it ruined, so I keep it in a nice box and on display.
Yeah, I mean, I think those, especially things like those McFarlane toys, I'm not sure that they're really meant for kids to be playing with. I think it's more about the people than the toys. I don't think we owe anything to the toys, but I think in situations where you're keeping things away from kids who might be getting enjoyment out of them, that's maybe a question. That was something. I didn't have anything mint in box, but when my own kids came along and they've discovered some of my toys at my parents' house and so forth, there was a little bit of I don't know that I want you playing with that because maybe you won't play with it right. And they went, oh, but you are an adult now, and that is not really an adult thought that you need to be having. What's more important is that your kid has a positive experience with it, and not that he has does exactly the same things that you did, or treats them exactly the same way.
No, it is I love sharing Star Wars, Spider-Man, all these things with my niece and nephews now, but yeah, my toys are the one thing I'm protective of. So it's like you said, I am more than happy to get them their own and have those. But yeah, but some of mine these are collector's items. They are not to be played with. But yeah, but no, I think it definitely hit it on a lot of those themes. Anything else you want to say about just the themes of the movie, or really any final thoughts? I know we we've delved into a lot here, so either that or just practical application from this discussion, because there is a lot to take away here.
Yeah, I think the only thing to underline, you brought it up before, but I think it's worth coming back to and thinking about the themes of the movie. Right when the sequence with in Sid's house and all the toys that have been rebuilt and what have you, just that extending a healing hand, whether is a good thing, and extending a welcoming hand is something that those toys demonstrate well. And, we could do far worse than to take away that particular lesson from this film.
I love that. I mean, it really just and I think it had an impact on me even as a kid, where I may not have understood all of it at the time, but it really is a great lesson in empathy and showing understanding of other people. And like you said on Inauguration Day, I'm not anxious at all about the next 4 years. But it does, I think that's one of the best things we can do to confront a lot of our anxieties, a lot of our fears, is just be empathetic toward other people and to lend a listening ear and try to hold off judgments. I think that is a great practice all of us can have going forward. Wow, awesome. Well, Andy, this has been fantastic here. We are about to wrap up, so we've got time for an extra question here for subscribers to check out after the show. So you can stay on just a sec for that. But Eddie, do you have another recommendation you want to give? It can be related to this topic or something totally different.
A recommendation for Toy Story. Yeah, I'm blanking a little bit, so I'll just go back to those Sporky shorts. If you just need a good laugh for 2 minutes, you could do far worse.
Hey, that's a good one. I'll say it's not directly related to Pixar, but this is another thing I've been geeking out on lately. It's a YouTube channel called Bullets and Blockbusters, which looks at kind of like what ifs with movies. So, like, for instance, like what if Guillermo del Toro had made Hellboy 3, or like the a famous almost happened Tim Burton, Nicolas Cage Superman movie. All these different, and not just those, but alternative versions of movies we did get. So like what Avengers could have been, or Dark Knight 3, or a bunch of others. So that is a fascinating one. I'm sure there will be some Pixar episodes at some point. So I do really recommend that YouTube channel for anyone like me who loves like really getting into nitty gritty geeky stuff related to movie history and alternative versions. So definitely check that out. So, but yeah, for our listeners out there, again, thank you so much for tuning in. We really appreciate it, and go support us on Patreon, and you give us good reviews on wherever you get your podcasts. We really appreciate it. And check out too in the show notes for this episode, you can look at the playlist for this whole series. We really appreciate you all listening. And remember, we are all a chosen people, a geekdom of priests.
Hey guys, Christian here to talk about our Captivate options. That's when you send us a little extra money to just help us along with our projects. But what do you get by giving us that extra money? Well, you have access to any future online D&D campaigns. You get extra bonus question content, which we do at least 48 times a month. You can make a one-time donation here of any amount to help support the show. This helps us with our overhead. That includes the editing software that we use, the recording software that we use, the marketing that we have to do for the show, the equipment that we all need to use to help out with the show, and more. So thank you for what you do. Head out to Captivate, help us out. We really appreciate what you do. See you later.
Hi, my name is TJ, and I'm here to tell you about the Anazal Ministry Podcast Network. We have a bunch of shows on AMP. You can follow the entire network in a single feed on Spotify at Anazal Ministry Podcasts, or on the network page on Apple Podcasts. Some of the ones we're running right now are The Homily, which is Pastor Will's homily messages from Holy Trinity Lutheran Church in Chapel Hill. We have the Whole Church Podcast, which one of my favorites. It's where myself and Joshua, we interview leaders from different denominations and backgrounds to work for a full church unity, Big C. We have My Seminary Life by Brandon Knight, former host on Systematic Geekology. He discusses his experience at seminary and discusses seminary topics so anyone can access the knowledge, which is kind of cool. It's like the book, Everything You Learn in Business School and then Everything You Don't Learn at Business School. That's great. We have Let Nothing Move You by Christian Ashley. He goes through the Bible kind of like it's a Bible study to explain the biblical narrative through his perspective and what he's learned. Dummy for Theology, which is Joshua's show. He discusses various theological topics in an attempt to show every side of big discussions. That leaves you with more questions than answers, which everyone loves a lot. It's kind of a continuation of a series that we did on Whole Church, but it's really good. It's really fun. We have the Bible After Hours, where the foul-mouthed preacher goes through the Bible from a progressive view to challenge the status quo of the modern church. I love that one. If you're from a more conservative background, that one I find will probably be the most helpful for you. Definitely check that out. And we have the Clydes. Taylor and Elizabeth Clyde go through weekly discussions in a devotional, conversational method to help us get closer to one another and God. that's just a little review of what we do in AMP and all of our other shows. So check that out, get subscribed, and just start getting all that free content, you know?